Hello and welcome to this new webinar about how to learn from your mobile application. This webinar is a part of a series about Visual Studio Mobile Center. I am Karl Piteira, Principal Program Manager in the Mobile Center team in charge of analytics, and with me here today is Malani, Program Manager for SDKs and Command Line Interface for Mobile Center. Learning about how your mobile application is doing is a challenge. You're so focused on getting that feature out there in the hands of your users, possibly without too many bugs and on time. A few months ago, as we set out to work on Mobile Center, I started to talk to lots of mobile application developers about what they wanted to learn about their apps. I had awesome and various feedback, and if I had to make a quote that summarizes most of it, it would be: when working on a feature, I want to know who my users are, what devices they have, what they are doing, and fix issues as quickly as possible. And this is what we want to talk to you about today. What you can learn from your app, get insights that users usually don't tell you, and find and solve your issues faster. Today is going to be a demo-intensive session, but we will start by talking about the challenges in mobile application development that you, as app developers, face, and was the reason why we created Mobile Center. Then we'll focus on how you can learn with Mobile Center, from the simple few steps to get the SDK integrated, to how to get custom events in order to discover what's going on in your app, and then how you can prioritize and fix your issues faster. There will be key takeaways at the end of each demo, and we will be happy to answer questions via the session during the session via chat. We are very lucky as mobile app developers. There is no lack of a job. Apple's slogan, "There's an app for that," really materialized, as today we see and use a myriad of apps, each for a very specific purpose. For example, when Facebook split Messenger from its main app. But even more so in the enterprise, with specialized apps for expenses, supply chain monitoring, fleet management, etc. All the operations must become mobile, and developers need to create an important variety of quality apps which evolve quickly to face the challenges of evolving and fast-paced business. But every single one of these apps needs to go through a multi-stage cycle, prioritizing features, designs, or issues based on feedback and requirements, test and deployment, which have particular challenges in the mobile world. Indeed, getting software in people's devices can be tricky, and testing for the wide variety of combinations of devices and OS can be daunting. And finally, learning from users to close the feedback loop and prioritize require a fast turnaround for it to be effective. Addressing these challenges requires a myriad of services, starting from continuous integration and continuous distribution, to offline synchronized storage, to analytics and crash reporting. And this is what Mobile Center is: your control center to help you simplify and accelerate each of the mobile app development step with a collection of independent services that can be used in isolation and integrated with your existing process thanks to APIs and CLIs. But used together, they are even stronger, as they offer a consistent and intuitive UI, SDKs, APIs, and CLIs. We are integrating them together so that when your build is completed and successful, it can trigger test and distribution, for example, and then let you learn from what's happening. The different services are build, test, and distribute for the DevOps part, tables, identity for the app development part, and analytics and crash reporting for the learning part. And we are adding new services as we speak in order to offer you an even more comprehensive platform. Today, we will talk about two of these services: analytics and crash. Analytics lets you collect information about what's happening in the app, but also information about the devices themselves. you'll get things like active users, sessions, devices, etc. And crashes will collect all the crashes happening in the app, will group them into groups of similar crashes, creating what we call crash group, and then let you know how many devices are crash-free, how many crashes happened, and get details, including complete stack traces on each of these crash groups, as well as individual crash reports. And to guide us in the journey of discovering Mobile Center Learn Experience, we will tell you the story of a to-do app that Ella developed. That app had a few downloads, and people even seemed to launch it because we could see some user accounts in the database. But one of our success metrics was the number of to-dos created by the users, and it is pretty low. But we have no idea what this might be. And we felt we needed some user behavior analytics, and Ella is going to integrate the Mobile Center SDK for that.
Thanks, Karl. So a common problem developers face after releasing their application is that they don't know how people are using their app, what's their usage behavior, and even if the application crashes for them. And the same thing happened to me with my to-do app. Let me tell you a bit more about this app. It's a very simple to-do app that lets users easily add and organize their tasks. You can select task type as personal, work, or community whenever you create a new task. So, I wrote this app in Android, submitted it in the App Store some time back, and it has good download count. But when I get the numbers on the new tasks added, that number is like fairly low. Also, my reviews online suggest that the app is crashing for some of the users. So, I just wonder why people are not adding more tasks even when the application is downloaded a lot of times. In order to drill down and fix this problem, I need to get more insights on my app audience, monitor my application better to understand its health. So let's onboard my to-do application in Mobile Center and integrate the SDKs. Our portal URL is mobile.azure.com. If you haven't registered yet, please go to our login page and sign up with either your personal account, your GitHub account, or a Microsoft account. Once you are signed in, you can see the landing page which lists all the apps that you have access to. I'll hit Add New App in here to add my to-do app. Let's give a name as To-do App, description as My Awesome App, and OS as Android and Java because that's what my application is written in. And then I'll hit Add New App button. And instantaneously, your app is created in Mobile Center. Once you're done with that step, you can see the Getting Started instructions on how to integrate Android SDK in your app. Note that we offer our SDKs in a wide variety of platforms. So if you're building your application in iOS, either written in Objective-C or Swift, in Android, in Xamarin, or React Native, you can easily instrument our SDKs. Also, our SDK repo is open source on GitHub. So you can easily go to the GitHub repo, look at our source code, look at the different features and APIs that we expose, and leave us your comments. Now, going back to the portal, we are going to follow the steps and integrate and set up the SDK in my to-do application. So the first step is to modify build.gradle file and add the following dependency lines. I'm going to copy the code from here. Go back to Android Studio. I have my file open in there, and I'm going to paste the statements that we just copied. Okay. Now let's look at these in detail. The first statement here tells you the latest version of the Android SDK that you need to include. And the next two statements are really what different modules in Mobile Center SDK you want to include. Because I want both analytics and crashes for my application, I will include both of them in here. And as soon as you modify this file, The IDE is going to prompt you to sync the changes. I will hit sync now button in here, and what's going on is the Gradle files will be downloaded by the IDE, included in your project, and you're all good to set up the modules in your app. Alright, we can see the message that the Gradle build is finished down here. Now, let's go back to the portal and look at the next instruction that we need to follow. So, you need to start the SDK, and particularly in the main activity class and on create callback, include the following code snippet. Let me just copy it from here. We are going to head back to the IDE. I have my file open, and I'm going to paste in the on create callback. As soon as you do that, the IDE is going to prompt you with some red errors because you need to import the classes in order to get going. So let's quickly fix that and import the classes. Alright, so all the 3 import statements are added right here for us. Let's look at what this API does. So this is the API that you need to start the SDK. The first parameter and the most important one is the app GUID or app secret. What it really is a GUID that uniquely identifies each application in Mobile Center. And then you specify the modules that you want to start. So we have designed our SDK in a very modular way where you need to include the modules that you really care about. Because I want to set up my application in both analytics and crashes, I'm going to include both of them in here. Alright, this looks good. Let's go back to the portal and look at the next instruction. Wow, all you really need to do is build and launch your application and go back to the analytics section. Let's do that. I'm back to my IDE. I'll hit run app in here. I will select the default Android Studio emulator that's already open in my app, already open on my device right now, and hit OK. And what's happening in here is the emulator is going to load and open the app for us. But you just saw that within few minutes, I was so quickly able to integrate Analytics and Crashes SDK in my app and onboard to these services in our portal. As you can see in the emulator, the app is all up and running for us. There are no tasks currently added because it's a fresh install. I will hit add in here, add a new task to pick groceries, set the type as personal and hit add. Let's look pretty simple, right? Now, let's go back to the Mobile Center portal and look at the analytics section. We are particularly interested in the log flow section in here. What the log flow section is going to do is to verify that the SDK integration works fine. This will display all the data that is received by our backend in real time. I would like to call out that normally it takes a couple of seconds for our data to be surfaced in the portal. But as soon as our backend receives the data, we can see that the SDK is integrated fine. And here we go. We have our very first log in the log flow section. Isn't that great? You can just integrate the SDK in your app and instantaneously see the data flowing in this section. So let's look at what we have in here. The first parameter is the unique device identifier that recognizes a particular device which is sending that data. The second piece of information is the start or is actually the log that is being recorded by our backend. In this case, we just started a session by launching the app, right? So you see a start session log. The next one is the GUID, and which is the session GUID that identifies that session ID. And the last one is the time where the log was received by our backend. So great, as you can see with this right here, that as your devices would start sending the data, you can instantaneously see them in the log flow section. Now, to wrap this up, let's look at what are the main takeaways for Mobile Center SDK. We have SDKs available in wide variety of platforms. If your application is in iOS, either in Objective-C or Swift, in Android, in Xamarin or React Native, just go and easily integrate our SDKs. They are all modular, so you only need to integrate the services that you want to onboard, and this will help you keep your app size very small. With a simple start call, you get analytics and crashes out of the box. And finally, our SDK repo is open source on GitHub, so check out our code, look into the features and APIs that we offer, and leave us any comments or feedback. Now, Karl will talk in detail about the analytics section.
Thank you, Ila. Now that we've integrated the SDK with that one line, let's look at what data we get from that integration. And for that, we'll go back to our UI for Mobile Center. And actually, we are going to fast forward for a few days and look at the data once it has been collected for some time. So we go back to our app and look at analytics and audience. And this is what we get primarily when we integrate the SDK. So on that audience page, we answer the type of questions like how many users do I have, how often do they come, for how long, and what devices are they using. And so let's look at that in details. And again, remember, we just put the SDK in the app and started the SDK with that one line. So we have the first chart, which answers the question how many users are actually using my app with the daily, weekly, and monthly active users, which is very important for you to know whether the app is used or not. Then next to that, we analyze the sessions with the number of sessions per user, which allows you to understand how often your users are coming back into the app on average, as well as in total. And session duration really allows you to understand the profile of usage for the application, meaning that we can understand how long they are staying. And here, for example, this is an app where we manage to-do, so it's probably an app where we want to spend a bit of time either looking at them, sorting them, creating to-dos, so that kind of shape for session duration is totally normal. The next chart is more about making decisions about potentially optimizing the app and making choices about the type of device and OS we are going to support. The top part is distribution of the most used devices, and that's where you can potentially optimize for a certain brand or a certain model. And the bottom part will give you a distribution of the OS distribution. On Android, we will show the API level, which is the most relevant to make decisions, potentially to drop an old and maybe not so used API level and focused on more recent ones. And for iOS, you will have the equivalent with the actual OS version. The next part will show you the countries and the language users come from. And again, this allows answering questions about should I optimize for a certain region, for a certain culture. And in terms of language, if you notice that some specific populations speak a certain language, you might want to translate the app in that language to even better serve your users and get great reviews. The last part concerning the device versions is really the propagation of your different versions in the field. And this lets you understand which version your recent users are on and figure out whether you can potentially drop old versions. For example, if you have a breaking change in your APIs and you would like to make sure that you abandoned the old version because it's taking up resources, you might want to make that decision based on the number of devices, the number of users that still use that old version. If it's really a very, very, very small proportion, then maybe it's okay to let them or even warn them about upgrading, giving them some time for that. So we've seen that we were able to collect all that data, all that information by just dropping the SDK into the app and initializing it with that one line. But that still doesn't answer our question, which is, in our to-do app, why do people come? Obviously, they make sessions, but why don't they create to-dos? And for that, we need to instrument the app. And for that purpose, we will use custom events that are available in Mobile Center. And let's have a look at the documentation for integrating custom events. In the UI, you will find the documentation here on the bottom left, docs and APIs, and this will jump to our documentation showing how to do various operations on Mobile Center. So you'll find the doc for all the services, specifically on Mobile Center, but also for the SDK, you'll have more details. So let's have a look at the SDK. And here, analytics. And because I'm on an Android app, I will select that since it's an Android native app. So that's where we can see that we can use custom event in order to track usage of feature. And hopefully, we will understand what people do that potentially lead them to not create to-dos and potentially even learn that they are not doing anything. So let's use that track event and let's have a look again at our application and what we can do in our application. And we can see that here that we can click here on that plus in order to add a task. We can give it a name. We can select the type, hit add to actually add the to-do or cancel. Well, here what I'll probably want to instrument is clicking on the plus to check whether people even found it and initiate the process. And then we'll probably want to instrument the cancel and the add button in order to understand where they are going from there. So let's do that. And I'll create some custom events for each of these. So back to my Android Studio, I will add some events on the key tasks there. So this is the onClick method, and in there I'm going to collect an event when the plus is clicked. So let's just quickly go back to the doc, copy-paste the instruction for that, and insert it here. There we go, analytics track event. We will call it plus clicked, and already collect that information. The second one we want to collect is when they click on the cancel button. And I'm starting with cancel because we want to do something special with the add button. So in the cancel, it will be pretty much the same. Track event, task canceled. And that's it. We will most probably collect that. For the add button, in addition to tracking the event, actually, I'd like to know whether they create tasks for personal work or a community, because maybe I want to optimize the usage of the app for certain category or events. And that's a great learning to have. So on top of understanding why they don't create tasks, maybe I can also learn which type of task they are creating. So for that purpose, we will need to get from the app the type of task they do and track it as part of the event. So I prepared that in advance here, not to waste your time. and we'll paste that here and we will look at what it does. So let me paste it here. So what we do here is we create a property map of key value pair, and the key will be the event property we will add to that event, and the value will be what the value we want to collect. And here, what we want in the event task added, we want the task type, which is why I put that key here as task type. And I am getting from the spinner what type of task was actually selected by the user here. And this should allow me to track my event. So let's go ahead and build and run that. And I'm going to look at that at the same time in Logflow. So back to our current to-do app, and let's have a look at Logflow to see whether we have instrumented that properly. So yeah, the app was launched again once we finished the build and execute it. So let's see when we click on that plus if the event gets tracked. So just remember, it takes a few seconds because it's going through the internet from event.emulator. And yes, we've got our event that appeared here. So let's first cancel to see if we instrumented that properly. And that's really the point of Logflow. The point of Logflow is to check that it works and if you instrumented the thing properly as you were expecting. So let's now create a task, my great new task for test. Let's select a different type of task and hit add. And let's see if we did that properly. Yes, good. So we have an event named task added with its properties. So looks like we're good. And now all we have to do is distribute that in the field. And by the way, in order to increase the speed at which you start getting feedback there, using build, test, and distribute for Mobile Center will greatly help you, because as soon as you commit that code to your repository, you could have a build triggered and distributed to your users, to your testers immediately, and start learning. And that's how Mobile Center will help you fasten that feedback loop. But let's go back to our current use case and again, fast forward a few days and look at it from an event perspective now. So we've let the app run in the hand of testers or potentially even end users, and we start learning. And what we realize here is that actually we have people indeed clicking the plus button and digging into a clicked, and let's focus on the last 7 days because that's the duration where we've been letting it run. It seems to be pretty consistent. A good portion of our users are doing it. Total count, and even more importantly, the count per user was good, which means that a user discovered that feature and they actually clicked on the plus. So that's a good thing. That's a good start. They know that this plus exists. So let's see what happens now with the next step, which is added. And that's where we see a problem. Actually, they are much more canceling than adding the tasks. And that's probably the core of our issue. Maybe they either don't get that or there is a problem. And actually, I remember now that when we developed our application, we switched the order because we thought that would be interesting, and probably that was a bad idea. And that's what was leading us to that issue. So let's have a look at the key takeaways we can get from what we learned here. First, we need to understand from the audience and get a way to get information in order to optimize for our users. Second, we can use events and even more importantly, event properties in order to track the feature usage. And third, we need to iterate through that, learn, validate, adjust continuously and the fastest possible. And now Eli is going to show us if we can learn from the crashes to see if other issues maybe crept up into the app.
Thanks, Karl. Before I talk about crashes, if you have any questions on SDK integration or analytics, please type them in the chat box below. So let's take a look at crashes service in detail. All the app developers, they aim at providing a very stable, crash-free version of their app for a great user experience. They want their apps to ideally never crash, but if that happens, it's important to monitor and understand what went wrong and why. And that's why we offer crashes service where you can continuously monitor the health of your application. This service is the next generation of hockey app crashes. We want to provide very meaningful and accurate crash reports and also plan on expanding the current feature set that hockey app offers. With just a simple one-line integration that you saw in my previous demo, we start collecting the crash information and send it over to our backend when the user opens their app next. So let's look at the fast forward app in the portal because our users have been using it over these past few days and see if they're experiencing any crashes. Now, this is the landing page for displaying all the apps in Mobile Center. I'm going to select the fast forward app in here. And here is the crashes service. With a quick glance, you know that we are collecting all the crashes for you and they are surfaced right here in the portal. If the SDK is not integrated or if there are no crashes for your app, the view is going to be very different. But for my to-do application, I instantly have some information on the crashes that users were hitting. That's good. I'm here to fix my application. So the more information I have, the better it is. Now, these graphs on the top will give you a quick glance of your application's health. On the left, you can see crash-free devices, meaning how many devices did not experience any crash on a particular day. You want this number to ideally be 100% as it indicates that your application is doing well. But if you see a sudden dip like I am seeing here, you know that something is going wrong with your application that you need to address. Now, the graphs on the right will show you the raw number of crashes per day, and you want this number to be really low. But just looking at these graphs, I know my to-do application was not completely crash-free, and I now understand why people were writing those reviews that the app was crashing for them. Now, the table below, it shows the type of crashes your app is experiencing. We bucket similar kind of crashes together and call it a crash group. With that information, you can also see the raw count of crashes for that particular crash group, the number of users who were hitting that crash, what version of that app were they using when the crash was occurred, and when was the crash last hit. Along with this, you can easily filter the information with the drop-down here if you want to narrow down based on time or the app version. Let's drill down to a particular crash group to look at more information. We provide you with very accurate stack trace where we think the application crashed. In Android, we process and symbolicate the crashes automatically. So you can see the class name, method name, and the line number where the crash occurred. For the iOS apps, you need to upload debug symbol file in our portal so that we can symbolicate those crashes. The highlighted red lines in here will show you where the crash was initiated. And with this information, you exactly know what's going wrong and where. So for my to-do application, I know that the crash was occurring in main activity class, save task method, and particularly line 87. The graphs down below will give you more information on that particular crash group. Crashes per day will give you the raw count of crashes that your app is seeing for that crash group. And on the right are two graphs that gives you more detailed information about the environment where the crash was occurring. By this information, you can easily try to reproduce your crash for that particular device and that OS and see what your users are experiencing. You can easily manage the crash groups from our portal. If you have a fix for your particular crash and you want to close it, just close the status of that crash group from this drop-down. If you feel that crash was not occurred by your code, but could be because of some third-party libraries, you can hit ignore and easily manage the crash groups right from this view so that you can keep a track of your progress. By this, quickly fix your crashes, release more crash-free version of your app so that the users don't hit those crashes again. So what we saw was the portal view of the crashes, but we also expose a bunch of different APIs and callbacks that developers can integrate in their app and set it up to perform more additional functions. Let's take a look at that. So I'm going to navigate to Docs and API section from the portal. And as you can see, we have a lot of documentation for all different services that we expose in Mobile Center. But let's look in detail for all the different APIs that we have for Android crashes. So if you want to know if your application crashed in last session or not, use the has crashed in last session API. If you want to get more detailed information about your last crash, use this get last session crash report API. And not only this, we also expose a bunch of different callbacks that lets you perform additional actions before and when sending the crash report. If you want to ignore a crash report to be processed, use should process callback right here. Or else, if user confirmation is important to you and you really care about their privacy, use the should await user confirmation callback so that you can get their confirmation before sending it to our backend. I would advise you to explore the different callbacks that we offer and expose and use it in your app to try them out. Now, the key takeaways for Mobile Center crashes services are: you can easily view and manage the health of your application. You can view your crash reports, look at the affected devices and OS where the crash occurred, identify the cause by looking at the stack trace, and then prioritize and fix the issue. And once that's done, you can release crash-free version of your application for your users. Now, Karl will conclude our webinar session.
Awesome. Thank you, Ella. So the only thing you have to do today is go to Mobile Center and go to aka.ms/Mobile Center to get started. You can just create your account from there, log in and create your app and just start collecting data and analyzing it. We've also put up a bunch of resources. First, the open source SDKs. So you will find all of our SDKs in open source on GitHub. Make sure that you get a look at them. And a few other things like the URL to the GitHub repo of that to-do app so that you can try out what we did today on your own. You will have also a link to the documentation to allow you not only to integrate the SDK, but also try out our APIs and also have more information about each and every services we offer. And last but not least, we have tons of other contents in our webinar series. Make sure you check them out. You can learn how to increase your speed of producing builds with automatic build in the cloud, test and distribute. You will learn about how to use tables and identity, and in general, how to use all the Mobile Center services together. We hope you liked it, and we'd be happy to answer more questions if you have any. Thank you.